Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Pep Talk. Welcome to the living room, actually, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Leon Theodore, the host of Pep Talk, frank conversations about the state of education. The disparities in our school discipline system, both nationally and here in Dallas, call attention to the need for change in our school culture. The use of zero tolerance practices and the overdisciplining of youth of color, specifically Black youth, have continued the flow of Black boys and girls into the school to prison pipeline. Our educational system spends vast amounts of money for security services and minuscule amounts comparatively on the mental and emotional well-being of our youth. Systemic racism, racist practices, and policies have impacted communities of color, but specifically Black communities, creating wealth and achievement gaps that spill into our school system. Implicit bias, a lack of cultural awareness, consistently criminalize Black student behavior while dismissing and minimizing the same behavior in other students. Zero tolerance policies and practices are proven not to change students' behavior, but increase aggression and disengage youth from the learning process. Learning is not one size fit all. Moving our educational culture from deficit thinking toward a whole child approach is the goal of PEP. And I'd like to welcome Antoine Joyce tonight, Dallas After School Project. And I'm actually excited to have you here, sir. I actually look up to you. You may not know that, but you're one of my heroes, man.
That's new. That's new.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Joyce, would you tell us? I'll let you introduce yourself.
Cool. Where to begin? And don't worry, everybody gets it backwards because of the organization. I'm the vice president and city leader for the All Stars Project of Dallas. Um, the All Stars Project Inc. is a national nonprofit. We began 40 years ago in New York City, and we started off with, if you will, when I say 40 years ago is when we incorporated the nonprofit, right? The founders of our organization were activists who wanted to create opportunities for all people. So they stood and marched with everybody on civil rights to women's rights to gay and lesbian rights, rights of the poor, and created many institutions to fight systemic racism in our country. And um, the All Stars Project, born out of activism, wanted to do something, wanted to give opportunities for poor young people in communities. I know we're going to talk about it later. Some people call them underserved. I don't call them that. I call them poor communities. And we began with talent shows as a way to give young people opportunity to create positive, things in their neighborhoods. And I could say more about that later. We have a leadership program that introduces young people to the performance of the corporate world. We have theater programs, and we have police community relations programs as well. I joined when I was 13 years old, 1991. And I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I was a poor kid, and I say that now as a 43-year-old man. I didn't know what poverty was at 13. Well, let me say this: you're poor, right? Because you always make jokes about being poor, right? And you hear the great comedians, "I'm so poor, I couldn't afford the OR," right? So like you talk about poverty, but in this joking manner, but you never want to admit that you are the person that the jokes are being made about, and partly because you don't want to be a joke, right? So that stifles where people can go when they don't when you can't, as we say in the All Stars, radically accept poverty, that it exists, that I'm in it. So what do I need to do to get out of it? But I'm going on a tangent now. I'm going way off the tangent now. But
You're
that
okay. You're
that's
okay.
but that was part of my life. And when I met the All Stars, I became a dancer and talent shows. Then we tried to rap I'm not a great
Wait, wait,
rapper.
wait, 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 wait. Slow
I'm
down.
not a great rapper. No, no. What's up?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I realized so, you know, again, like many young men in poor communities or young men, period, black men, you want to be a part of something bigger than what you are. And being in this dance group that my cousins started, and then when they turned to a rap group, I just didn't want to be left behind. What I'm saying? It's kind of like this was something that was giving me life, and now you're going to do this other thing. I can't rap, so I had to go back home and learn how to write a rap. And they invited me to be part of the group. So, but what it taught me was how to MC, because I always saw myself as Freaky Ty with the Lost Boys. Saying I'm like I'm that dude. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Saying I'm like I'm Spliff Star. Saying like
Dating yourself, right?
yeah, I am dating myself right.
Yeah.
I was I want to be the ultimate hype man, you know what I'm saying? Like
Okay.
that's what I want to be. Like so if you look at my Instagram, my moniker Diddy of Development, because after a while I'm like, I'm gonna be like Diddy. Like he's in the background. Yeah, take that. Uh-huh. Can't stop, won't stop. I'm like, I'm not stopping either. Let's go. The development stuff, let's go. Right. So anyway,
You gotta see why I like this dude and why I look up to him, man. It's rare. It's rare to find someone that's in the position that you're in and that remains humble and real and but expresses himself to the fullest. And that's what I appreciate about you,
I
sir.
appreciate it, man. So, but that's that's
Yes,
that's
sir.
me, man. So again, I lead the Dallas work now. I came in 2013
Okay.
as an opportunity to see if I can, join the work that's been going on here for many years to impact the lives of our young people, to give them the things that I had opportunity to. And again, we can get more into that, but it was exposure and opportunity, exposure and
Nice.
opportunity to a world that wasn't at first available for me, or at least I didn't feel like it was available to me.
Thank you.
And I was introduced to it through a lot of the peers and the mentors that were in my life, the leaders of this organization. And so when I look at young people today, I'm going, I want to give them everything that I got. It's possible, but it takes a lot of work too. So I always challenge adults to do more work as well. So anyway, I'll stop there and you know,
No, 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 no. So we did have questions that we were going, but just going off of what off of what you're talking about and how you presented it. Perception equals potential is just that. It's about understanding that as educators, as the system that these kids are involved in, that they're trying to become learners, right? And that we are we're the key holders, right? So if we don't present them with the opportunity to be the best they are, or give them the opportunity to see who they are or who they can be, then they remain, like you said, without knowing that that opportunity is there. And especially when you talk about, you said it better than I could ever say it when you said that being poor, you don't want to be poor. You make jokes about it, but you don't want to be the butt of that joke, so you know what that is, and that creates a perception of self. You, as no matter how hard you fight against it, that creates a certain
yeah,
thought process or a certain aspect of how you see yourself, and that's what I think school should do. But then that's the for my next question is, does does after school really take the place of, does it fill that gap? Does it really fill that gap that it seems like is missing with the education system, or is it just an addition?
so that's a great question. So after school, so I hope I get some of this right. I always tell people fact check me, right? I never want to sit here like I'm the great know-it-all. But I watched a documentary on the history of after school, and I found it fascinating because There was even things I never really thought about. Like, just so when I think about like 2021, we sit here with all the amenities of the world that was created. You know, you got parks, you know, you have, you know, buildings to educate students in, you know, we got cell phones, we got all these things, right? And it's sometimes hard to remember there was a time when it wasn't, right? When there was a time when there wasn't public parks. I'm 77, baby. So that was even prior, like right when I was born, like this whole concept of public parks was the beginning of after school. As the documentary started talking about, where, you know, you had the Great Depression and you have all these people who are out of jobs and all these kids on the streets, and people were like, okay, what do we do? And after 3 o'clock, well, what do you do with these kids after school? Because people are still trying to work, they're trying to get these jobs. So you have hundreds, thousands of kids on the streets getting into trouble because they got energy, and it's like, okay, well, we got to create something for this population of young people. And you know, some young people were getting lost to gangs that were popping up and stuff like that. And so after school was sort of born as a place to address that need. Then the documentary talks about there's this shift along the way where school education, you know, and I say this lightly, co-ops after school to become an addition, as you mentioned, right? So, and a lot where you see that addition happen, if you will, that relations to it as addition was in poor communities where school grades weren't up to par and on a national level with white counterparts. So when I got into the after school arena, there was a whole conversation around supplemental education, right? Um, where okay, you're not, you know, you learn your ABCs during the day, and then after school, we're going to do some more remedial ABC stuff. So then after school became this big place where people were relating to it as is a safe place. They need some fun, but also we need to focus on catching them up, catching kids up. What after school actually is, and what we advocated for in the All Stars Project, it's a creative space for young people to try new things, to be exposed to the world in different ways, to become part of the world, so that, as you mentioned earlier, they can become better learners. You know, so in some ways, we kind of think of school first and then after school second, where in
Right.
some ways it's almost like there's, I mean, young people spend 80% of their time outside of school from that 3, 4 o'clock on Fridays, I mean, Saturday, Sunday. That's 80% of their life is outside of school. And as somebody said in the meeting that you was in with me the other day, is it's not like they're not learning during those 80% of the time. They're learning something. They're learning something from the TV. They're learning something from the interaction of parents, from the community, what's going on outside. So how do we take that 80% of learning time and create an opportunity for kids to continue to develop their lives, to see themselves in positive manners, and so that when they go to school and things pop up in the book, they go, "Oh, I just saw this. I just learned about this. Now the subject is more interesting to me because I have a new relationship to it." You know, so so I think after school is it shouldn't be related to as an addition. It is a space to develop kids. That's what it is. So
Very good. Thank you. And I'll segue into, so we have school-based mentoring and
mhm.
community-based mentoring, and that's what, after school programs are broken down into those two, like, what, not really broken down, but that's the what word would I use for that? The official word for, it's either it's school-based mentoring where, like you said, they're doing math and remedial things, but then I think so, and I did my research as well. So it was, I did a bunch of reading and all of that, and they were talking about the school based stuff, and they mentioned what you were saying, like what this was born from. But the part that I don't understand is how did we get from school being a whole person or a whole child aspect where it's it's just as important to feed a child's experiences and what you're saying that after school does, as it is to teach them the ABCs. Because if you don't empower them in that way, and you said it, was that they don't there's no connection or relationship to the education. Some kids do, but a lot of kids don't, especially when we're talking about youth. And I'll use your word, poor. We say undervalued, but
Yeah.
um you know to do, for those youth. So what is the importance of both school-based and community-based programming?
Yeah. I'll answer that by answering something you said in the question where you said, um, how did school get, I'm now paraphrasing, how did school get here, right? So the
Yeah.
interesting thing is it only got here for a certain population. So
I'm
let's just
trying
be,
to move around now, right? So
I know you are, but it's hard not to, because and again, sometimes people take sound bites and they take it on a tangent. So I like to put my
yes,
disclosures out there, but
yes.
however it gets taken, when so as a fundraiser, I talk to a lot of supporters who believe in what we do. So I appreciate every last one of them. And what I learned as a fundraiser in my career, when I listened to them, because a lot of fundraising is listening and learning about what's important in their lives. And I've heard amount of times, right? Oh, I can give this much this year because I'm putting so and so, my child, in private school. My child is going to this school and it costs X amount of dollars. My child has horseback riding lessons. Oh, I'm so tired today because I'm running around. We went to ballet, and then tomorrow's art class, and yada yada, right? Oh, the school is doing XYZ. And I start putting it together. And I'm like, interesting. Like in certain communities, in our affluent communities, school is not just related to education. It,
Thank
it
you.
is related to the whole child and extracurricular activities that grow the child. So when this happened in public education, where large amounts of Black and Hispanic kids go to, I don't know. I don't, say that's probably happened in the 70s, 80s, whatever. But there became a point where, again, you know, that as they call it, the achievement gap, the learning gap, started to expand, and people started trying to hold people accountable and saying, well, the gap is too wide. We got to focus on grades. So what gets X'd out is all the extracurricular things that support young people to learn started to go away. Band goes away. Art goes away. All those fun things. I mean, this is part of my life. Like I went to all Black schools in public in elementary school. I was smart enough, if, I say air quotes, because there was a program called Prep for Prep, where if you tested it to Prep for Prep, you went to a prep school, private school.
Okay.
So I've been in a top class since I was in second grade of this school. Only one person in that class went to Prep for Prep. Luckily, she's still a friend of mine. Love her to death. She's like my sister. She gives me a hard time every day. Saying, but love her to death. And she's a professor now, like super smart. She always was super smart. But out of this top class of 25 kids, only she made it. The rest of us went to another Black middle school for another program, SP program, and some of us skipped eighth grade, or we did seventh, eighth grade in one year. Then I did ninth grade in junior high school. By high school, now I get taken. I make it into this public school, Midwood High School, and it's majority white. Now, here's where the difference started to happen. You know what I'm saying? That in this majority white school, I remember eighth grade doing lab, and we did lab on a computer. And we had a frog on a computer with a thing. You had to use the mouse to cut the knife, whatever. And we played Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego in some classes. I remember this silliness. In Midwood, I had to get up 6 a.m. in the morning because I had a 7 a.m. lab. And the school had a lab with real dead frogs. And we had to open up frogs and pull the hearts out with the tweezers and dice and do this whole thing with the frogs. My gym was volleyball. And then I went to class after that. I'm in history class, and these two white guys are throwing this little round ball with a stick and a net on the end of it going like this. I'm like, what are they
What is
doing?
that, right?
Oh, you never heard of lacrosse before? Like, we have a lacrosse team? Like, this is this school, right? So I've never seen this. And when I didn't make it through Midwood, there was so much cultural things that I just didn't know. So I failed. And so when I went to back to a high school in my neighborhood of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, you had basketball and football in gym. And in gym, you had some gymnastics, whatever like that. And we had one dance class, and I took that because I had to make it for credits, whatever. But nobody played volleyball or lacrosse or soccer in Bed-Stuy. You know what I'm saying? It's all black school. So those are the differences that I start to see with education. So when you start talking about the nonprofits, in that work, that becomes some of the things that nonprofits are trying to fill in. They're trying to fill in these other large life gaps that education, again, in mostly black and brown student areas, aren't fulfilling anymore because the focus became on dimension. I'm trying to read what Clarence is saying.
Yeah, I just saw that myself, right? Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Say more, Clarence. I'm not following what you're saying. They're trying to fill in those gaps of what's there, right? And look, I'm not saying that focusing on grades is not right, but how we focus on the grades. To what you were saying earlier is, I'm reading about things in history in these history books in school that right now doesn't make any sense to my life right now.
Yes.
But then you travel the world and you go, oh, how was this made? And then you learn a little piece of history.
Got it.
And then, yes, exact. Thank you. Thank you,
That's a good,
Clarence.
that's the right answer, Clarence. That's a good
All right.
answer. Thank
One
you.
dimensional limited exposure. Exactly.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so I was just in Costa Rica last week, right? So sorry for everybody who had a hard time in Texas. I heard it was really hard. I I missed it by chance. I had this
We're
wedding
gonna put
planned.
you up there with Ted, right?
I can't write it. I was like, sorry, I didn't mean to Ted Cruz, everybody. But my all-star sis was getting married. I was like, I'm gonna make it. Um, but I was in San Jose for one day, and I went to the National Museum. And just going to the National Museum, right, there was one section that talked about the slave trade and how slaves ended up in Costa Rica. And you grow up in America and you kind of like think of only about the U.S. United States of America and slavery here. And it's like there was slavery in Canada, there was slavery in South America, and how does all that stuff work together? Right. And I'm like, I'm sitting there just mind boggled. And I was talking to somebody, I was in Brazil 2 years ago. And this guy said to me, he's like, well, I relate to myself as American because I live in South America. And I was like, oh, that's big. You know what I'm saying? So it's how people, again, it's how people see themselves in the world. So then it makes me go back to the history books and go, well, what am I reading here? Let me ask some questions. Let me be more into what this is and challenge the teachers on how or what you're saying to me so I can be a learner, not just to pass the test, but so I could be a citizen of the world.
And that's, I'm glad you went exactly where I needed you to go. Um, is because there's a difference between being told what to do and what so we call it education, and there's a difference that between that and learning. Actual learning is something totally different than just being rote memory, just kicking things back out that you've been put in, that have been told to you to kick out. Learning requires experience and experiences. Learning requires all the things that, as you said, in certain schools they get. And again, I have to go back to what PEP is here for and why I'm bringing you on. And you know, that's what we're community schooling, and the importance of community schooling, and what that actually means. And back to the original thing was, so with community based and school based, um, should there be a collaboration, or not really a collaboration, but should they both be the same? Should the community based programs, or after schools programs as we're calling them, be implemented in schools, like in school time, during schools? Does that need to change? Because we're talking about the future of after school. And you and I said something a little earlier in the week about something about this, because you know how I believe. But it's do you yourself think the future of after school should be school based or in school time?
That's a hard one. It's a hard one because for me, so my fiance is an educator, right?
Okay.
So I've known educators prior to her, obviously, but um, I see how much work goes into educating our students, right? It's not easy work.
No, at all.
And I sometimes say when I'm in different meetings, I'll be in different meetings with our with Hinojosa, with presidents and chancellors of colleges and so forth. And I hear what they are trying to do. So some of them they have tried to listen to what the population has been saying, and saying like, you need to do more. And so they try to do more, but then there's experience, and this is my experience, that they don't do what they are there to do well, because now they're trying to do everything else. So then I wonder, I'm like, well, if we really just focused on the schools to teach the ABCs, and I know I'm being,
No, no,
elementary,
no, you're okay.
right?
You're okay.
And we've created a way for, as you said, community-based organizations to do what they do best. Would that be helpful? Like, the school, unfortunately, we sort of turned to a place where, because between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m., majority of our young people are in these one locations, that we feel like the schools have to do everything. And it's impossible. It's impossible for one entity to do everything, even as big as they are, even as much as whatever. Now to the point of learning, though, again, there is some developmental learning that I think can be more incorporated in schools. So, like field trips should not just, like when I started doing field trips when I was younger, it was kind of more, it felt like more like fun. Maybe I wasn't getting what was going on back then, but how do we put more focus on the field trips where you understand the relationship to what I'm about to do in like in these textbooks, right? And look, I'm talking really small here, because I know some teachers do that. They're like, we're about to learn this thing. Now we're going to go to the museum and see this thing. And sometimes it works like that. But I think it needs to be more, right? Like more like that's once a week, not every 3 months. You know what I'm saying? We do a special
Yes.
thing. That just
Yes.
it can be more part of what learning is, because learning is not just the books. Learning, like you're saying, is the experience outside of the classroom. It's how the world is working. It's learning is also businesses opening up their doors and saying, so this if this is the end goal for some of you, well, this is how you get here, right? You know what I'm saying? Um, like when I take students to the top of the Bank of America building, one of my supporters has an office up there, and the first thing you do, you walk in this building and you're like, oh my gosh, lobby is expansive, marble floors. Then you walk in the elevator and, I press that 54 button and they look at me like, excuse me, we going where? Yeah, we going to the 54th floor. It's always funny, like not funny, haha, but like it's a new experience because the kids retreat into the corners. They're
Yeah.
like, like you've never been this high before. The elevator's going fast, the ears start to pop, right? But then they get up there and they relax. They're like, "Oh, this is cool." And they see this fancy food in this fancy boardroom. And then you stand up to the window and you look outside of downtown Dallas, and you're like,
Didn't
"What
even
world is
know.
this?"
Had
Right?
no clue that
No clue.
it could be that good.
It could be that good, right? Right.
Yes.
So if I'm just making this up as I go all the time. If I'm in an engineering class, taking the students to the 54th floor of a building, and then telling them to look down, and then it's like, well, how do we build it? Well, there's engineering right there, because now the question is like, yeah, the elevator. Like when I first learned about the different kind of elevator systems and stuff like that, and you go to Thanksgiving Tower, they have the odd and even elevators because the elevators are on top of each other. That still blows my mind. I'm like, the kids are like, why are we stopping? Because somebody's getting off on the floor above us. You mean there's people above us right now? Yep. It's standing right on your head. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. That's yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
That's
So
learning. That's
that's
learning.
learning, right?
Yes.
And it
Yes.
sparks questions. So then when you go to the book, okay, let me read about how this stuff works. You know
Actually
what I'm
works.
saying?
And then it becomes relevant.
It becomes relevant, right? Walk the
Yes.
Trinity. Like I love walking the Trinity and thinking about when I was reading this book about Dallas, about how the levees, why the levees were created. Because West Dallas will flood and it wiped out communities. It was like, oh, so man had to engineer this levee system so that you can live and we could go to a restaurant at Trinity Grows. You know what I'm saying? But that's history too.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
And that's what I believe that's what I'm thinking. So when we get back to it, when we boil all of that down, I love how you make it so palatable, right? So it's not just a in your face, okay, this is this is that, right? You're saying you make it palatable because of who I am and where I come from. It is, look, this is enough. We know that this doesn't work. Why are we not doing this? But it does happen in other places. So why is it not happening where you need it the most? As you said, we're focused on um, ABCs in Black and Brown communities only, but then that's not what you see in other communities. And if you know that the need is greatest there, and I'm not saying that Dallas doesn't do it, but like you said, it's not done. There's We're trying to do too much.
Right. Well, see,
And
sorry, that's not to cut you. So this is why I use the word intentionally poor, because unfortunately we made poverty a something that is disgusting, something that you got to step away from, right? Like the terminology, right? I had to look it up once because somebody was really challenging me on it, because they was like, calling young people poor, doesn't that does something to their psyche? Doesn't that make them feel less than? And I'm like, I'm not making them feel less than. And so right, the purpose of we use this term in the All Stars called radically acceptance. Sometimes when people hear radically acceptance, they kind of throw it on you, right? Well, I'm going to radically accept that you're, saying you're allowed, right? Like that's just Leon, right? And I'm going to be accepting of that and when I walk into a room with Leon, I'm going to be like, okay, this is all the stuff that we make up. I'm using real small examples here.
You're good.
But radical acceptance is more about radically accepting about who I am and where I am. It's more about it's even more about me, right? So again, when I was growing up, the things that hindered my life that that luckily not luckily, but my mother never talked finances in my household, right? So the first time that I took out a credit card when I was in college, and you run this thing up, I didn't know I was going to be in debt so fast, and that now I have bad credit,
You and me both.
right? And that now that bad credit is following me for a number of years. And when I finally got to a point where I wanted to do something in my life, I can't because I didn't even know what I was doing 7 years ago, right? Like so there's things about when you don't radically accept that you're poor, you shield yourself from things, right? There's things that you don't know about the world. So again, my mother doesn't have that conversation with me. My dad doesn't have that conversation with me. And then I like Clarence, man.
If I'm sitting here too, man, I'm reading this too. Keep going.
Right. And then it stifles your growth, right? Because growth, again, as we're saying, is all about learning. So if I would start relating to these things like credit and things like, I ain't worried about that, right? I have a young man now who I mentor who says, I'm not even getting a credit card, man. I'm like, why not? Because I don't believe in owing people. I said, I hear you, and I'm not going to fight you on this today, but I'm trying to help you see 5 years from now. I'm trying to help you see what I didn't see. So in 5 years, let's say you need a new car. What happens then? You have no credit because our economy runs on credit.
Credit. Right.
So if you're worried about owing people, I mean, there's a way to establish credit in a smart way, not
Yes.
to owe anybody, but to establish that you are responsible. If you're responsible enough to pay Leon back his $20 every time he loans it to you, you're responsible enough to hold a credit card and spend $20 and pay that back
And pay that off.
and
Yes.
establish yourself. But because poverty stifles how people see themselves in the world, we tell ourselves these stories that these things are not important for us to grow. So then you don't progress, right? So
Yes. Yes.
so that's why we use poor a lot, not as a stigma, what I'm saying, because let's be honest, there's more white Americans in the country who are poor as well.
Yes.
Our country just made
A
our
black
color
face.
face
Yes.
the
Yes.
poster child of poverty.
Of poverty. And so and thank you for that. And that's why I chose this word undervalued because when you think about business, right? When you and education is a business, unfortunately, and you have to have the business of it. But when you think of something as undervalued, right? That means that the responsibility lays on you, right? As the person running the system, it lays on you because if you have something in the corner that has value but you don't place any value on it, then you're losing a profit that you could gain if you knew how to use it or how to empower it or any of those things. And then when you think about those kids, and we think about our kids that are undervalued. We overlook them because we named them something like you said, poor or whatever they choose, economically disadvantaged or at risk. That kills them because they're at risk for what? For not being seen as something positive or seen as something valuable. So that's why I choose. I've been pushing for undervalued because it's just it's not my fault that you don't see who I am because a lot of kids that we they have to make it big, and then you say, oh, he came. Those stories that we always find, those kids that came from what they call abject poverty, and then now there's something. But what about the 10,000 other kids who made it despite all of their issues, and it didn't come from this? It's just, I'm really tired of us not, number one, educating or creating a learning environment. Um, I think that for me, after school should be incorporated, like we were just saying, in school time. And I actually believe that if we change the mindset, if we empower teachers, because teachers are overworked, if we empower them, learn, figure out, include their voices, hear them, take time to support them. That's who's affecting or inspiring or not inspiring our youth. So I just I think,
We need to pay them more too. I just put that out there.
huh?
Okay, so we need to pay them more too. But like
Yes, we definitely
you
need
know,
that. But
um,
I
there's
say
so
all
much
that to
to
get
it.
to, what is your utopia? What is your utopia?
Wow, I saw that in the briefing, and I was afraid of that question. I was afraid of that question because I feel like I think part of what I'm thinking right now is, I usually tend to shy away from from answers that are sort of finite, right?
Okay.
Like, so I think about, again, we're in Black History Month, and I made this personal challenge. I need to do one today to make a post every day about something Black or something that's current, right? My first post was, to celebrate Black history, we have to continue to make Black history. And so, because I always have this attitude, and I know it's me, so forgive me, everybody, where we start to, put King's speech up, and King gave this wonderful speech of his utopia. And there's many ways you can say we realize that, right? There's Black and white kids playing together in the streets, not all the time, what I'm saying, but for largely, right? You and I can go to different restaurants. I go to restaurants with white people who are, the dominant um, entity there, what I'm saying? And not, nobody bothers me. Like, I have, you know, police officers, white police officers who are friends of mine, say, like, there's a lot of things that I feel like is great. And then there's sometimes, and I'm not saying this for everybody, there's an illusion that we don't have to keep fighting, right? So when George Floyd gets murdered, it awakens people that we have to keep fighting. But I don't want to wait for another George Floyd to keep fighting, right? Like, I don't want to lose so much in order for that to be so, so I don't know I even have an answer what my utopia is, because in some ways I think we're always creating and always growing and always developing, and we got to keep going forward with each other. Um, and we can't and we got to do it with each other. Like, so my, I guess my utopia is that everyone is fighting, even with the people that you disagree with, and that's the hard part, right? So I'm in a study group. We were reading and listening. We're reading James Baldwin book. Um, oh, I'm blanking on it right now. I'm blanking on it. Don't know my name. Sorry, well, I'm gonna
It's
Google it right
okay,
now.
man. It's okay.
It's
It's
okay. Yeah,
okay.
like,
Take your time.
I 43 years old. I feel like I'm getting that old man syndrome. What's that talking about, kids? But in his in this um radio interview that we were listening to, right? He was talking about how even in the Jim Crow South, that the anger that white people have towards blacks, right? If we keep them at bay, if you will. I'm explaining it wrong, but if you don't include them in the going forward, well, how do you go forward? Because then you
Can't
just
go
have another
forward.
population of angry people who is not being brought towards the utopia, right? So even as we progress as blacks and Hispanics, as Asians, as whatever, as women, you know, we can't leave behind even the other people who we think are backward. We got to figure out how to include everybody in the building of our future. And that's the hard work right there, you know, to, as they say in the Bible, to love thy neighbor, right? Like
Yes.
it's easy to say the words and to read this to read it and go to church every day, and it's really hard to practice it up close. So and from that, I started reading a little bit of oh man, why am I having these senior moments? Hold on, I'm just pulling it right here.
Man, you a mess, bro.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like it's like John Lewis across that bridge, right?
Okay, okay.
Like have that moment. And it's 6:44. That's why it is. You know what I'm saying? And in his first chapter, faith, you know, he starts off. He literally starts off as like, you know, I get asked all the time, how did we remain nonviolent in those protests while people are spitting, calling us names, beating us up, and whatever like that. And he's like, he had faith that that they're on the side of right, if you will, but faith that people will see this struggle and join them and create something new with that. And it's like, I don't know if I have that much faith in myself, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, if I go outside right now and start marching and somebody hits me, you know, say this Brooklyn boy comes back out. I'm like, yo, you know, say let's get right. I'm like, y'all good. You know what I'm saying? So I'm learning. So I'm trying to take lessons from again our history, our past. You
Okay.
know, trying to keep teaching myself in looking forward. Like, what is a utopia for 2021, 2022, and beyond? Like, what is utopia for my kids, man? Like, you know, I'm a little naive. I'm thinking that the work that I'm doing would make a better place for my kids, so they don't have to fight this hard. But again, if I gotta tell them, and I started talking to them, like after I'm gone, you still gotta keep pushing forward for this. We may create utopia, but it still could be taken from us. So you always gotta keep creating it. You know, you can never just let up, right? So
I'll take that one. I'll take that. That's that's and actually what you're saying is that your utopia is now because you're doing the work. So what
yeah,
you're doing now is what you're looking for in the future. It sounds like, and that works for me. Because all I want for me and for the kids that we serve is that they have the opportunity to see an open world for them. And that doesn't mean that it's easy. That doesn't mean that it's any of that. It's just the fact that you have the opportunity to see or be anything that you think you can be or see. And even if you don't see it, you still have the ability to, or the access to do that. And
well,
you know
that's the key thing. Like Clarence was saying in chat, you know, you gotta see it.
yeah,
You gotta
yeah, and
see
you
it.
have to. You have
So,
to.
like to your point, I can make a decision on where I want to be if all the decisions are there, if all the options
Yes.
are there, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, you know, Clarence he said more exposure equals doctors, lawyers, stockbrokers, right? But you know, I always say this about my life. So my mother raised four boys on welfare. So I can tell you all the welfare stories in the food stamp book, you know, say like, I wish I had an EBT card because at least it was a card. I had to tear out the paper out of the book. Right? And then then when she got an associate's degree, she was a benefits manager, a caseworker. So for a large amount of my life, up until she passed away, all I seen from her was environments of poverty, of institution, pain, and so forth like that, right? my father was a mechanic and a bus driver, so I seen him, saying these really blue collar jobs. Saying I'm not, you know, even less than that probably, right? I didn't know any doctors and lawyers and things until I started meeting other people in the organization of the All Stars and started growing up and asking questions about what do you do? Like, you're a private eye, you're a banker. What's a banker? You know, like, what's a hedge fund? Like, that blew my mind when I learned what a hedge fund was, right? Say, how to invest money. Like, the first conversation I had about investing money was with a white Italian guy who became my mentor, Joe Forgione, right? Um, and he helped us develop the program that we have now, Development School for Youth, because he was like, I want to take kids to the stock market. So we got to go see the stock market. What is all these people yelling out? They're doing it. They're trading stocks. Like, what stocks? And the questions just kept snowballing, right? What's mergers and acquisitions? Just kept snowballing. So you got to see it. Then you're like, okay, well, I want to do that. How much money that guy make? Oh, he makes about $120,000 a year. Oh yeah, okay. Got to be good at math. All right, well, let me go back to that math book. You know what I'm saying? Algebra was easy anyway. Let's go.
Right.
Right?
That's what that's it right there, man. That's the thing. I think for me, the future of after school is to make it into school, and that you guys that we create whole child experiences, and that we just continue to let education change because it has not for me. I don't see the change, and that's what I'm looking for. And I
Yeah.
think I'm grateful for after school space, and I'm grateful for you who you have a vision and desire to see uh, a whole child, and education being something about the whole child, not just a one dimensional vision. So I'm grateful for that, man. I'm
Thank you.
grateful for that. Well, that was my final question. It was the your utopia.
I
Appreciate you
appreciate it.
taking the time to join me today, and I appreciate you being who you are. I see this dude gonna get up now. He's telling me it's time to go, but I appreciate you coming to the living room, man, and thank you for being here.
Anytime, man.
Yes, sir. And next week, our next conversation is to be with Leonard Cello Webb, dismantling the school to prison pipeline. And
Yeah.
join us that's the 11th of March. And thank you very much, Mr. Joyce, for joining me. And I appreciate it. And you have a wonderful night, sir.
You too. And thank you,
Yes,
Pet.
sir.
I mean, thank you,
Yes, sir.
attendees and everybody watching on Facebook. Appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, man.
Yes, sir.